The Sith ritual that's worse than death lurks in the darkest corners of Star Wars lore, hidden within the obsidian ruins of Malachor 5. I still remember the silence that fell over the temple when the screaming finally stopped, not because the pain had ended, but because something worse had begun. The air grew heavy, tasting of metal and fear as my master stood among the bound captives, their eyes empty yet somehow still aware. The ancient texts called it the Rite of the Hollowing, EIA, a forbidden technique that doesn't just kill its victims, it unmakes them. It severs soul from body while preserving both in eternal torment. As the ritual reached its peak, I watched 17 souls suspended in the air like trapped fireflies, their empty bodies standing in a perfect circle around the pit. That's when I realized the truth. My master wasn't seeking knowledge or even power. He was creating vessels, empty shells waiting to be filled with something ancient, something hungry, something that should never enter our world. What would you do if you discovered that immortality came at a price too terrible for anyone to pay? The screams stopped 3 days ago. That was when I knew the ritual had truly begun. Silence replaced agony, an unnatural quiet washing through the obsidian halls of Malachor 5, a silence more terrible than any cry could ever be. I am Kylo Ren, apprentice to Darth Valis, keeper of forgotten rites, and witness to horrors beyond comprehension. This testimony serves as warning, confession, and perhaps my only remaining act of will before what comes next claims me entirely. My master taught me that pain is clarity, pain is truth. Pain is the way of the Sith. I believed him until I saw what waits beyond pain. The captives we gathered from across the Outer Rim territories no longer feel pain. They feel nothing at all. And somehow that has become the most frightening thing I have ever witnessed. The ancient texts called it the Rite of the Hollowing, a forbidden technique even among the lords of the Sith. Now I understand why. The ritual does not simply kill, it unmakes. It severs soul from body while preserving both in eternal torment. My master calls it transcendence. I call it something else. Something I dare not name aloud within these walls where even thoughts seem to echo. The temple we discovered beneath the surface of Malachor 5 was not built by hands. The stone itself was persuaded to grow according to the will of ancient Sith alchemists. Black crystal formations spiral upward into vaulted ceilings that seem to absorb light rather than reflect it. The air tastes metallic, charged with energy that makes teeth ache and skin crawl. Every surface is etched with writings in languages so old they predate the Republic itself. My master spent 3 standard months translating a single wall of text. When he finished, he laughed for the first time since I had known him, not with joy, but with something like vindication. That was when the collection began. The gathering of subjects, the preparations for what he insisted would be his masterwork. I remember the first arrival. A Twi'lek trader who had the misfortune of discovering our location while searching for salvage. Vahalis did not kill him immediately. Instead, he spoke with him for hours, asking questions about his life, his family, his hopes. I thought perhaps my master was extracting information. Only later did I understand he was establishing connection, creating a map of the man's soul. The stronger the connection, the more powerful the ritual. Soon there were more captives. A Republic survey team, smugglers, mercenaries, even a young Jedi Knight who had been tracking rumors of Sith activity along the Outer Rim. 17 subjects in total, each one carefully selected, each one meticulously prepared. Preparation took many forms: physical deprivation, mental torture, injections of alchemically enhanced compounds that heightened sensitivity to the Force. My master worked with a precision that was almost admirable. There was no wasted effort, no unnecessary cruelty. Every action served the ritual. Every pain had purpose. I assisted as required. I told myself it was necessary. That knowledge demanded sacrifice. That power required payment. I was a faithful student, eager to learn the secrets my master promised to reveal. I never questioned what those secrets might cost. Not until it was too late. The central chamber of the temple contains a circular pit 15 meters across. The floor of the pit is inlaid with obsidian runes that pulse with crimson energy when activated. 17 pylons of black stone rise from the edge of the pit, forming a ring around its circumference. The captives were bound to these pylons, one by one, as the preparations reached their conclusion. My master stood in the center, reciting incantations in that ancient tongue, his voice growing stronger as the prisoners grew weaker. The air seemed to thicken, to congeal around us like blood clotting in a wound. I felt the force twist in ways I had never experienced before, bending away from natural patterns, reshaping itself according to my master's will. The screaming began on the first day. It continued without pause through the second. By the third day, the voices had gone hoarse, then silent, though mouths still worked soundlessly, eyes still bulged in terror. That was when I realized what was happening. The subjects were being hollowed out. Their life essence, their very souls, were being extracted and contained, while their bodies remained animate, empty vessels waiting to be filled with something else. My master explained it as we watched the process unfold. The rite of the hollowing was not merely about death or pain or even power in the conventional sense. It was about transcendence, about creating vessels free from the constraints of individual will, about preparing the way for something greater to inhabit flesh that had been cleansed of identity. It was then I saw the truth. Valis did not intend to simply kill these people. He intended to transform them into eternal servants. Consciousnesses trapped in a state between life and death, bound to his will for all time. And as his apprentice, I was expected not only to witness this atrocity, but to embrace it, to see it as the culmination of my training. But some lessons reveal more than the teacher intends. As I watched the ritual progress, as I felt the force scream in protest at this violation of its nature, I began to understand that there are lines even a Sith should not cross, powers that should remain untapped, knowledge that should stay buried in the ruins of dead worlds. I faced a choice that was no choice at all. To complete the ritual alongside my master, binding myself to this perversion forever, or to destroy it, knowing the cost would be everything I had worked for, perhaps even my life. But watching the empty shells of what had once been people, seeing the clouded remnants of their souls suspended in the ritual field like insects in amber, I knew what must be done. The time for action approaches. I can feel the ritual reaching its crescendo. Soon, my master will call me to take my place beside him, to add my power to his, to seal the fate of 17 souls and damn my own in the process. I have hidden this account among the ancient texts, a confession and a warning to whoever might find it. If you are reading this, know that some knowledge is poison, some power corrupts beyond redemption. Some rituals, once begun, consume everyone involved. The Sith seek mastery over death, but there are worse fates than dying. I have seen them with my own eyes. The choice I make now is the only one I can live with, or die with. The outcome hardly matters anymore. I hear my master calling. The final phase begins. The initiates never understood what we sought on Malachor Fiv. The inner circle of the Sith Academy spoke of it in whispers, a legend among legends. Ritual so potent it was said to grant not merely extended life, but a form of true immortality. Not through cloning, not through transfer essence, not through any method attempted by Sith Lords throughout history. The rite of the hollowing offers something far more elegant, far more terrible. I first heard of it 3 standard years ago, when Master Valis summoned me to his private chambers on Dromund Kaas. The room smelled of incense and old parchment. Artifacts from a dozen dead civilizations lined the walls. At the center stood a pedestal supporting a single pyramidal holocron, its edges sharp enough to draw blood at a touch. Vahalis activated it without speaking. The holocron opened like a flower, petals of light and darkness unfolding into the air between us. The gatekeeper who appeared was unlike any I had seen before. Not a single figure but many, a shifting amalgamation of faces and forms that spoke with multiple voices in perfect unison. My master asked one question: "Is it real?" The gatekeeper answered with coordinates. Nothing more. The holocron closed, and Valis turned to me with eyes that burned with purpose. We departed that same night. Our journey took us to forgotten worlds, abandoned temples, libraries sealed for millennia. We collected fragments of knowledge, pieces of a puzzle scattered across the galaxy by those who had recognized its danger. My master was methodical, relentless. When one lead went cold, he would find another. When one source proved false, he would discard it without hesitation. I watched him closely during those months of searching, saw how he grew thinner, more intense, how he stopped sleeping, stopped eating except when his body demanded it. I mistook his obsession for dedication, his cruelty for necessity. I was a faithful shadow, learning, observing, believing that I was being prepared for some great revelation. The breakthrough came on Mustafar. In the ruins of an ancient castle, we discovered a vault sealed with alchemical wards, so powerful they had survived the collapse of the structure around them. It took my master 7 days to break those seals. 7 days without rest, without food, channeling the force in patterns I had never witnessed before. When the vault finally opened, it contained only a single item, a mask carved from volcanic glass, featureless except for narrow eye slits and a mouth frozen in a silent scream. My master lifted it with reverence, turned it over in his hands. Inside the mask was an inscription, burned into the smooth inner surface. Coordinates, a name, Malachor V. The planet was quarantined, officially marked as hazardous due to tectonic instability. In reality, the Republic had recognized the darkness that permeated its surface and declared it forbidden. My master merely saw this as confirmation that what we sought was real. If the Jedi feared it enough to seal away an entire world, it must hold power worth claiming. We slipped past the automated warning beacons in a ship with falsified registry codes. The vessel was small, unmarked, equipped with sensor baffles that rendered it nearly invisible to standard scans. The ship identifier transponder classified it as Maintenance Craft RF-724, authorized for survey operations in the Corlean sector, a fiction that would hold long enough for our purposes. Malachor V greeted us with storms. The atmosphere was toxic, corrosive, filled with particles of volcanic ash that clogged filters and abraded exposed surfaces. We landed in a valley surrounded by jagged peaks, the ground beneath our ship cracked and unstable. The force felt wrong here. Polluted, as if the very essence of the planet had been poisoned by what had transpired on its surface. My master wore the volcanic mask as we explored, claiming it protected him from the toxic atmosphere. I wore a standard breath filter, my lungs burning despite the protection. Later I realized the mask served another purpose. It allowed him to perceive things, hidden from normal senses. To see pathways through the twisted landscape that would have remained invisible otherwise. We found the temple entrance on the 3rd day, a narrow fissure in the base of a cliff, unremarkable except for the complete absence of sound around it. No wind, no shifting of stones, a pocket of absolute silence in the midst of a howling wasteland. My master approached it without hesitation, the mask tilted toward the opening, as if listening to voices I could not hear. The passage beyond the fissure descended steeply, switching back on itself multiple times as it burrowed into the planet's crust. The walls were not rough stone but polished obsidian, reflecting our glow rods with a clarity that seemed to multiply the light. There were no signs of construction, no tool marks, no seams, as if the tunnel had been formed by simply convincing the stone to flow aside. Hours passed as we descended. The air grew warmer, heavier with moisture. The silence intensified until I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. My master moved with increasing urgency, no longer taking precautions against traps or defensive measures, as if he knew with certainty that the temple wanted us to reach it, that it had been waiting. The tunnel ended abruptly, opening into the vast central chamber I described before, the circular pit. The 17 pylons, the walls covered in script that seemed to crawl across the surface when viewed from the corner of the eye. My master removed the mask and smiled. a genuine expression of joy that was somehow more disturbing than his usual stern demeanor. "We have arrived," he said. "Now the real work begins. The collection of subjects was my responsibility. My master remained in the temple, translating inscriptions, preparing the ritual space, communing with whatever presence lingered in that ancient place. I was dispatched in our ship, instructed to bring back suitable vessels for the working. I want them alive," my master told me. I want them strong in both body and spirit. I want them afraid, but not broken. "Can you do this for me, apprentice?" I said yes without hesitation, without understanding what I was agreeing to. I believed we were gathering research subjects, that their sacrifice would advance our knowledge of the Force, a necessary evil in pursuit of a greater truth. I told myself many things to justify what followed. The first expedition brought back 3 captives: the Twi'lek salvager I mentioned, a human female scientist who had been documenting Malakor's atmospheric anomalies from a research station in orbit, a Zabrak security officer who had attempted to defend her. My master examined them carefully, testing their reflexes, probing their minds, drawing blood samples that he analyzed using equipment I had not seen before. The Zabrak was rejected. "Too weak in sensitivity to the Force," my master declared, "a blunt instrument when we require precision tools." I was instructed to dispose of him. I did so quickly, telling myself it was mercy compared to what awaited the others, another lie I chose to believe. My second expedition yielded better results. 5 subjects, all meeting my master's criteria. Force sensitivity was key, though not formal training. Raw potential rather than disciplined ability. The ability to feel deeply, to form connections, to experience both pleasure and pain with full awareness. My master tested each one personally, using techniques that left them conscious but compliant, ready to be prepared for the ritual. Preparation was systematic. Each subject was isolated in a cell carved from the same obsidian as the rest of the temple. No furnishings, no comforts, nothing but smooth black walls that reflected their fear back at them. Food and water were provided at irregular intervals, disrupting any sense of time. Sleep was interrupted by sudden bursts of sound or light, basic techniques but effective in creating the necessary mental state. Physical preparation was more complex. My master developed a compound that enhanced connection to the Force, a molecular key that unlocked potential regardless of training or natural ability. The injections were administered daily, the dosage increasing as tolerance developed. I watched as ordinary beings began to perceive the currents of energy around them, their eyes widening in wonder before narrowing in pain as sensation became overwhelming. There were deaths during this phase. 3 subjects whose systems rejected the compound, their bodies convulsing as their minds shattered under the pressure of sudden awareness. My master was not concerned. Failures were anticipated, accounted for in the ritual design. We simply increased our collection efforts to compensate. The final group included the Jedi Knight. She was captured on Dantooine, investigating rumors that had been planted specifically to attract Jedi attention. A Padawan had accompanied her, but did not survive the encounter. The Knight proved more resilient, more valuable. My master was particularly pleased with this acquisition, spending hours interrogating her, testing the limits of her training and will. She never broke, not completely. Even as the compound tore down the barriers between her conscious mind and the raw power of the Force, she maintained a core of selfhood that resisted corruption. My master saw this not as failure but as confirmation. The stronger the will, the more powerful the result when that will was finally subsumed into the ritual. By the time all 17 subjects were prepared and positioned around the pit, the ritual chamber had transformed. The obsidian surfaces pulsed with subdued crimson light. The air shimmered with potentiality, with power waiting to be shaped. My master donned ceremonial robes of deepest black, embroidered with symbols that hurt the eyes to look upon directly. He had me kneel before him, placing his hands on my head in a gesture that might have seemed like blessing if not for the cold purpose behind it. "You have served well, apprentice," he told me. Now witness the culmination of our work, the transcendence that all Sith seek but few have the vision to achieve." The ritual began simply enough. My master stood in the center of the pit, arms raised, voice intoning words in that ancient tongue. The captives strained against their bonds, sensing what was to come even without understanding the specifics. The force gathered around us, thick and viscous, responding to the call of the ritual. The first phase targeted the physical body. The compound that had been administered to the subjects began to react, their skin glowing from within as if illuminated by internal fire. Veins stood out in sharp relief, mapping networks of pain across flesh. The screaming began then, raw and primal, the sound of beings experiencing agony beyond comprehension. My master explained each phase as it progressed, his voice calm and instructional despite the suffering surrounding us. "The physical body must be prepared," he said, "made permeable. The boundaries between flesh and force must be thinned until energy can flow freely between them." The second phase focused on the mind, psychic barriers collapsing as my master systematically attacked the sense of self that defined each subject. I felt it happen through the force. 17 unique signatures being eroded, their edges blurring, individual characteristics fading like colors bleaching under harsh sunlight. The screams changed then, becoming more desperate, more afraid. No longer simply a response to pain, but an expression of fundamental terror. The terror of ceasing to exist while still conscious. "The mind is an illusion we create to make sense of existence," my master lectured. "A convenient fiction. By removing it, we remove the limitations it imposes. We create vessels capable of containing something greater than individual consciousness." The third phase was what broke me, what forced me to confront the truth of what we were doing. My master called it soul extraction, though the concept is more complex than those simple words suggest. Using the force and the ritual energies we had gathered, he began to draw out the essential selfhood of each subject, not killing them, but separating what might be called their souls from their bodies. I watched it happen. Watched as something luminous and ineffable was pulled from each captive, suspended in the ritual field like glowing embers. The bodies remained animate, hearts beating, lungs drawing breath, but the eyes became vacant, empty. The screaming stopped because there was no longer anyone there to scream. Just hollow shells, 17 bodies without occupants. My master gathered the extracted essences, compressing them, binding them into a swirling nexus of energy at the center of the ritual field. The power was immense, palpable, a storm of consciousness forced into unnatural unity. "This is the power source," he explained. "The battery that will fuel what comes next." It was then I understood his true purpose. The ritual would not end with death, it would create something far worse. 17 souls bound in eternal torment, their energy constantly renewed, constantly harvested, and 17 bodies, empty and waiting, ready to be filled with something else, something ancient, something that had been waiting in the temple of Malachor V for millennia. My master intended to bring back entities long banished from our reality, to give them form, substance, presence in the physical world. The rite of the hollowing was not about immortality in the conventional sense. It was about resurrection, about breach between worlds. I watched the swirling nexus of captive souls pulse in the center of the ritual field, heard their silent screams echoing through the force, saw my master's face transformed by triumph and terrible purpose. And I knew I could not allow the ritual to be completed. The choice crystallized in that moment: to continue as the loyal apprentice, to share in whatever power my master claimed, but also to share in his damnation, or to act, to oppose what should not be, to accept that some knowledge is too terrible, some power too corrupting, some rituals too blasphemous even for a follower of the dark side. In that moment, facing that choice, I understood something my master had never taught me, something perhaps he had never learned himself. The dark side is not evil because it is powerful. It is dangerous because it convinces us that power is the only metric by which to judge our actions, that anything is permissible if it makes us stronger. Looking at those empty bodies, those trapped souls, I saw the lie at the heart of that belief. Some prices are too high, even for a Sith. Some lines, once crossed, transform us into something we should never become, not because of weakness, but because of wisdom. My decision was made. The only question that remained was how to act upon it. How to stop a ritual already in progress without unleashing forces even more destructive than those my master sought to control. I needed time, I needed knowledge, I needed a plan. I feigned continued loyalty, asking questions, observing closely, looking for vulnerabilities in the ritual structure. My master, consumed by his own success, saw only what he expected to see. An apprentice, eager to learn, to witness, to share in the glory of his achievement. He did not sense my revulsion, my horror, my growing resolve. The final phase would require both of us. My master made this clear as the ritual reached its peak. My power would be needed to stabilize the breach, to ensure that what came through remained under our control. Without me, the entities he sought to summon might prove uncontainable, destroying everything in their emergence. I asked for time to prepare myself, a reasonable request given the magnitude of what was to come. My master granted it without suspicion. 3 hours to meditate, to gather my strength, to make myself ready for transcendence. 3 hours to find a way to destroy everything we had worked for without destroying ourselves in the process. I returned to the library chamber where the ancient texts were stored, searched frantically for anything that might help, a counterspell, a weakness in the ritual structure, a way to free the trapped souls without unleashing the horror waiting on the other side of the breach. I found nothing directly useful, but I did find something else. Understanding. The ritual had been attempted before, centuries ago, by Sith alchemists whose names had been deliberately erased from history. They had succeeded in opening the breach, but failed to control what came through. The entities had consumed them, taken their forms, used their knowledge to wreak havoc until a combined force of Jedi and Sith had driven them back and sealed the temple. The seal had not been perfect. Over time, the boundary had thinned. The entities had whispered to those sensitive to the Force, drawn them to Malachor V, manipulated them into attempting the ritual again. My master was not the visionary he believed himself to be. He was a puppet dancing to strings pulled by ancient intelligences far more cunning than he could imagine. This knowledge did not provide a solution, but it did confirm the necessity of action. Whatever the cost, the ritual could not be completed. The breach could not be opened. The entities could not be allowed entry into our reality. I returned to the central chamber with clarity of purpose, if not of method. My master was waiting, the ritual field pulsing with captive souls, the empty bodies standing limp around the circumference of the pit. Everything was prepared, everything was ready. All that remained was for me to take my place and add my power to his. He smiled as I approached, a smile of genuine pride and anticipation. In his eyes I saw not evil but conviction. The absolute certainty that what he did was necessary, or was right, was the culmination of the Sith path. In that moment, I almost pitied him, almost understood him, almost forgave him, but understanding is not acceptance, pity is not absolution. Some actions cannot be forgiven. I took my position opposite my master, across the ritual field, the swirling nexus of souls between us. He began the final incantation, his voice resonant with power and purpose. The obsidian walls pulsed in response, the crimson light growing brighter, more insistent. The very air seemed to thin, reality itself becoming permeable as the breach widened. I felt them waiting on the other side. Ancient, hungry, patient beyond human comprehension. They had waited millennia for this moment. A few minutes more would make no difference. They watched through the thinning veil, their attention focused on my master, on the power he offered, on the vessels he had prepared. They did not watch me, did not recognize me as a threat. Why would they? I was merely the apprentice, the assistant, the loyal shadow. I used their blindness, their dismissal, their arrogance against them. While my master chanted and the breach widened and the entities gathered, I enacted my own working. Small, subtle, unnoticed amidst the greater energies being channeled, I could not free the captive souls. Their selfhood had been too thoroughly extracted, too completely bound to the ritual structure, but I could release them, could grant them the mercy of true death rather than eternal torment, could deny the entities the power source they needed to fully manifest in our reality. The technique was simple, a variation on force drain, but inverted. Instead of taking life, I gave it, poured my own energy into the nexus of bound souls, overloading the containment field, disrupting the careful balance my master had established. It was like throwing a flame into a fuel depot. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. The nexus exploded outward, souls freed from bondage in a sudden rush of light and sound. My master staggered backward, his concentration broken, the incantation interrupted at its most critical juncture. The breach began to collapse, reality reasserting itself, the entities howling in rage as their opportunity slipped away, but they would not go quietly, would not accept defeat so easily. As the breach closed, they reached through, not for the vessels prepared for them, but for my master. He had opened the way. He had made himself permeable to their influence. He was vulnerable in a way I was not. I watched as something dark and terrible poured into him, filling the spaces in his being, taking control of flesh and bone and will. His body contorted, his face twisted in a rictus of horror and triumph. When he looked at me again, it was not my master who stared from behind his eyes. It was something ancient, something other, something that should never have been given form in our world. "You," it said in a voice that was and was not my master's. "You have interfered with forces beyond your comprehension, apprentice. You have denied us our rightful vessels, but one will suffice for now. One will allow us to prepare the way properly." It lunged toward me, moving with a speed and grace that my master's body should not have been capable of. Hands that were no longer hands reached for me, fingertips elongated into talons, skin rippling with patterns that hurt the mind to perceive directly. I defended myself on instinct, drawing my lightsaber, the crimson blade igniting with a snap hiss that echoed through the chamber. The entity laughed with my master's mouth. "Such primitive tools," it mocked. "Do you think Sith steel can harm us? We who existed before your kind learned to kindle fire. We who will remain when the last star in your galaxy burns out." "Perhaps not," I replied. "But it can harm the vessel you inhabit." I struck not to kill but to cripple. A precise slash that severed tendons, that rendered limbs useless without immediately ending life. The entity shrieked in my master's voice, more in outrage than pain. It had not expected resistance, had not anticipated that I would be willing to destroy my own master to prevent its full emergence. "You fool!" it hissed as my master's body collapsed to the chamber floor. "You cannot destroy us. We are eternal. We are inevitable. If not through this ritual, then another. If not through this vessel, then another. We have patience beyond your comprehension." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, "but not today. Not through him. Not through me." I raised my lightsaber for the killing blow, but hesitated, not out of mercy or sentiment, but because I sensed a deeper truth. Killing my master's body would not destroy the entity that had partially emerged. It would merely release it, allow it to seek another host, another opportunity. The breach was closing but had not yet fully sealed. There was still danger, still possibility. In that moment of hesitation, the entity acted, not against me directly, but against the temple itself. My master's hands, still functional despite the damage I had inflicted, pressed against the obsidian floor. Power flowed outward, not the controlled energy of the ritual, but something wild and destructive. The chamber shuddered. Cracks appeared in walls that had stood unblemished for millennia. The temple itself began to collapse, stone flowing like liquid, the carefully constructed ritual space dissolving into chaos. If we cannot have our vessels, the entity declared, then none shall have this place. It will be buried, forgotten again, until the next seeker comes, until the next ritual begins. The cycle is eternal, apprentice. Your victory is momentary. I did not stay to argue. The temple was collapsing around us, the ceiling beginning to cave in, the floor becoming unstable. The captive bodies, empty shells still standing around the ritual pit, toppled lifelessly as the pylons crumbled. Whatever faint chance they might have had for restoration died with the ritual. Perhaps that too was a mercy. I ran, left my master and the entity that had claimed him to whatever fate awaited them in the ruins. Perhaps death, perhaps something else. I did not look back to find out. I made my way through collapsing corridors, navigated passages that twisted and changed as the temple tore itself apart. The Force guided me, or perhaps simple luck. Either way, I reached the surface as the entire structure imploded, sinking deeper into Malachor's unstable crust. Our ship remained where we had left it, untouched by the destruction below. I took off without pre-flight checks, pushing the engines beyond safe parameters, desperate to put distance between myself and that cursed place. As the ship broke atmosphere, I looked back at the planet's surface. A new wound had opened in the landscape, a crater where the temple entrance had been. No sign remained of what had transpired below, no evidence of what had almost happened. Nothing but another scar on a world already defined by its scars. I set course for deep space, with no particular destination in mind, just away. Away from Malachor V. Away from what I had witnessed, away from what I had done and failed to do. The navigational computer requested a destination designation. I ignored it, manually piloting until the stars stretched into the lines of hyperspace. Only then, in the silence and artificial calm of faster-than-light travel, did I allow myself to think, to process, to confront the implications of what I had experienced. My master was gone, either dead or transformed into something worse than dead. The captives were beyond saving. The ritual had failed, but at terrible cost. And I remained, changed. No longer the loyal apprentice, no longer certain of the path I had chosen, no longer convinced that power alone was worth any sacrifice. I had been willing to die to stop the ritual, had been prepared to kill my own master, not for personal gain or advancement, but because some acts are too monstrous to allow. Some knowledge is too dangerous to preserve. What kind of Sith does that make me? Or am I even Sith at all anymore? I have no answers. Only questions that echo in the emptiness of the ship around me. Only memories that will never fade, no matter how much I might wish them to. Only the certainty that I cannot return to what I was before. Cannot unsee what I have seen, cannot unfeel what I have felt. There are rumors in the far reaches of the galaxy, whispers of other temples, other rituals, other secrets buried on dead worlds. Perhaps I should seek them out. Not to use them, but to ensure they remain forgotten. To stand guard against those who would repeat my master's mistakes. To be the warning I wish we had heeded. Or perhaps I should simply disappear, find some remote world where the Force flows quietly, where ancient horrors do not whisper from forgotten tombs. Live out whatever time remains to me in contemplation of all I have witnessed, all I have learned, all I have lost. The decision lies before me like an unopened holocron, full of potential and danger. Whatever path I choose, I do so with open eyes, with full awareness of the cost, with the understanding that some rituals, once begun, change everyone involved beyond recognition. If you are reading this account, take warning from my experience. Some knowledge is poison, some power corrupts beyond redemption. Some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. The rite of the hollowing is one such door. Let it remain sealed, let it fade from memory, let it be forgotten by all but those who must remember in order to prevent its return. I am Kira Ren, once apprentice to Darth Valis, witness to the rite of the hollowing. This testimony serves as warning, confession, and perhaps my only remaining act of will before what comes next claims me entirely. The stars rush past my viewport, endless and indifferent. Somewhere among them lies my future. Whether redemption or damnation waits, there I cannot say. I can only move forward, carrying the weight of what I have seen. The memory of 17 empty shells standing in a circle, the echo of souls bound and tormented, the knowledge that some fates truly are worse than death. Even for a Sith, the path from Malachor 5th led me to places I never intended to go, truths I never wanted to face. The ship drifted for 20 standard days before I set a destination. 20 days of silence and memory, of questioning everything I had been taught, everything I had believed. I finally landed on Ambria, a world as desolate as my thoughts. A desert planet scoured by ancient Sith alchemy, its surface hostile to all but the most resilient life. The dark side lingers here, contained but not erased, concentrated in a lake of pure malevolence at the heart of the largest desert. I made camp far from that place, wanting solitude but not corruption. The first month passed in a haze of regret and anger. I meditated, I fasted, I pushed my body to its limits, hoping physical exhaustion would quiet the voices in my mind. The faces of the 17, my master's eyes as the entity took possession, the knowledge that I had not truly won but merely postponed an inevitable confrontation. During the second month, I began to explore the planet more systematically. Ambria has its own history of Sith presence, though nothing as ancient or terrible as Malachor 5. Still, there were ruins to investigate, artifacts to catalogue, knowledge to recover, though I approached each discovery with new caution, new awareness of the price such knowledge might carry. It was in one such ruin, a small shrine half buried in sand, that I found the first confirmation I was not alone in my quest. A journal, its pages brittle with age, chronicled the experiences of another who had witnessed the rite of the hollowing. A Jedi, not a Sith, but one who had recognized the same truth I had come to accept. Some powers should remain forbidden, regardless of the philosophy one follows. The Jedi, whose name had been carefully excised from the journal, had encountered a similar ritual on a world called Kaleth. The details differed, but the essence was the same. The extraction of souls, the creation of empty vessels, the summoning of entities from beyond the veil of reality. The Jedi had stopped the ritual, but at the cost of falling to the dark side. The journal ended with a warning similar to my own. Some knowledge corrupts absolutely. Some rituals consume everyone they touch. I was not comforted by the parallel. If anything, it deepened my unease. If the same ritual, or variations of it, had been attempted multiple times throughout history, then the cycle the entity had spoken of was real. An eternal pattern of discovery, attempt, failure, and burial, only to be rediscovered generations later. Each time, the breach opened a little wider. Each time, the entities came a little closer to full manifestation. I began to search more purposefully after that, not just on Ambria, but on other worlds with known Sith connections. Korriban, Zeost, Dromund Kaas. I moved carefully, avoiding both Republic and Imperial notice. I was a ghost, a shadow, a seeker with no allegiance but to the truth I pursued. Over the course of a standard year, I pieced together a fragmentary history. The rite of the hollowing was ancient beyond reckoning, predating even the formation of the Sith Order as it is currently understood. It originated not with Force users at all, but with a civilization so old their name has been lost to time. A people who discovered that reality is more permeable than most sentients realize, that what we perceive as separate dimensions occasionally intersect, allowing passage between worlds. These ancients had not sought to bring entities across the barrier. Rather, they had tried to cross over themselves, to escape some cataclysm that threatened their existence. The ritual had worked. After a fashion, they had indeed passed beyond our reality. But in opening that door, they had attracted the attention of the entities, had shown them a way in, had created a breach that never fully healed. Subsequent civilizations rediscovered the ritual, modified it according to their understanding, attempted it with varying results. Always the pattern was the same: initial success followed by devastating failure. The entities allowed enough progress to whet ambition, to encourage further attempts, but never permitted full manifestation of their true forms or purposes. They were patient, playing a game measured in millennia rather than years. Each attempt brought them closer to their goal. Each failure taught them more about our reality, our vulnerabilities, our desires. They were learning, adapting, preparing. The question that haunted me was simple but terrifying. How many more attempts before they succeeded? How many more cycles before the breach opened fully? Before they crossed over in force, not just as possessing spirits, but in their true and terrible forms? I found no answer in the ancient texts, no prophecy or prediction. Just fragments of knowledge, pieces of a puzzle too vast to comprehend from my limited perspective. But I did find something else. References to a group that had dedicated itself to preventing the completion of the ritual. Guardians who worked from the shadows, identifying potential attempts and stopping them before they reached fruition. They had many names in many cultures: the Broken Circle, the Hollowed Hand, the Watcher Concord. Their methods varied according to the records. Some worked through direct intervention, killing ritual practitioners before they could complete their work. Others operated more subtly, removing or destroying key texts, sabotaging preparations, misdirecting seekers away from true knowledge toward harmless alternatives. I became convinced this group still existed in some form. Had to exist, given the stakes involved. The challenge was finding them, when secrecy was their primary defense against both the entities and those who would unwittingly serve them. No official records would acknowledge their existence. No public database would list their members or methods. My search led me to Nar Shaddaa, that cesspit of a moon where information is just another commodity to be bought and sold. I spent 6 standard months there, moving through the shadowed Undercity, following rumors and whispers, trading what knowledge I dared share for leads that mostly proved false. I was beginning to think the group was extinct, a historical footnote rather than an active force, when I received a message on my secure datapad. The coordinates led to an abandoned processing plant in the industrial sector. The access code bypassed security systems that were more functional than they appeared. The turbolift descended far deeper than the building schematics suggested was possible. I went armed but not aggressive, cautious but not fearful. Whatever waited below could hardly be worse than what I had already faced on Malachor 5. The lift opened into a chamber that reminded me uncomfortably of the temple, not in architecture or atmosphere, but in purpose. A place designed for ritual, for working with forces beyond conventional understanding. But where the temple had been built to open breaches, this place was clearly intended to seal them. 5 figures waited for me, their faces concealed behind masks of varying designs. Not Sith masks or Jedi ceremonial gear, but something older, more primal. Masks that suggested awareness of realities beyond the conventional. They stood in a semicircle, silent, watching as I stepped from the lift. Judging. Evaluating. Deciding. "I am Kira Ren," I said simply. "I witnessed the rite of the hollowing on Malachor 5. I prevented its completion. I seek understanding." The central figure nodded once. "Understanding is the beginning," a voice replied, neither male nor female, modulated to conceal identity, "but not the end. What do you seek beyond understanding, Kira Ren? Redemption? Power? Absolution?" I considered the question carefully, knew my answer would determine everything that followed. "Truth," I said finally. "I seek the truth of what I witnessed, the truth of what waits beyond the breach, the truth of how to ensure it remains sealed. Truth is dangerous," the figure warned. "More dangerous than lies in many cases. Are you prepared for what truth might cost you, for how it might change you?" I thought of my master, transformed by his pursuit of power, of the 17 vessels, emptied of selfhood in service to ritual, of the entity that had spoken with such ancient confidence of cycles and inevitability. "I am already changed," I replied, "already paying the cost. Truth cannot take more from me than ignorance already has. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the group. Then the central figure gestured, and the masks came off, one by one. The faces beneath were not what I had expected, not wizened masters or battle-scarred warriors, just people. Ordinary people of various species and ages, unremarkable except for the weight of knowledge in their eyes. "We are the Watcher Concord," the leader said, voice no longer modulated. "One iteration of many throughout history. We identify attempts to breach the veil. We prevent completion of the ritual in whatever form it takes. We preserve the knowledge necessary to recognize the signs, but limit access to prevent misuse. We maintain the vigil that has continued for millennia. And you want me to join you, I guessed." The leader smiled slightly. "You have already joined us, Kira Ren. The moment you chose to stop your master, to prevent the ritual despite personal cost, you became part of the Concord. The only question is whether you will embrace that role consciously or continue to work in isolation." The choice seemed clear enough. Working alone, I had discovered fragments of the truth. Working with the Concord, I might gain access to knowledge accumulated over thousands of years. Might find answers to questions that had haunted me since Malachor 5. Might discover if there was any hope of ending the cycle permanently rather than simply delaying the inevitable once more. "I accept," I said, "on one condition, no more secrets between us. I want the full truth, not just the portions you deem safe to share." The leader exchanged glances with the others. "You ask for dangerous privilege," the leader responded. "Knowledge we have kept compartmentalized for good reason. The full truth has broken stronger minds than yours." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, "but partial truth led my master to disaster, led 17 innocents to fates worse than death. I will not work blind again, no matter how noble the cause." Another silent exchange passed among the group. Then the leader nodded slowly. "Very well, the full truth, insofar as we ourselves possess it. But understand this, once given, this knowledge cannot be taken back. Once seen, these truths cannot be unseen. Proceed with caution, Kira Ren, with awareness of what you ask." "I understand," I replied, "and accept whatever consequences follow." What followed was not a simple briefing or data transfer. The Concord did not maintain records in conventional forms, vulnerable to theft or corruption. Instead, knowledge was preserved through shared memory, passed from one generation to the next through a form of communal meditation. Not quite a meld of minds, but something similar in effect if not mechanism. For 3 days, I sat in a circle with the 5 members of the Concord. For 3 days, they shared memories not their own, experiences spanning centuries, knowledge accumulated across dozens of worlds. I witnessed other versions of the ritual, other attempts to open the breach, saw the entities more clearly than I had on Malachor 5, understood more of their nature and purpose. They were not demons or gods or any concept that fits neatly into conventional understanding. They were simply other. Beings evolved in conditions so alien to our universe that their very existence violated the principles that govern our reality. Their presence caused corruption on a fundamental level, warping the Force itself into patterns never intended. They desired access to our universe not from malice as we understand it, but from something more akin to hunger. Our reality was energy to them, substance, sustenance. They would consume it as fire consumes air, not from hatred, but from existential necessity. And in the process, they would transform everything they touched. Would remake our universe according to principles incomprehensible to organic minds. The rite of the hollowing was merely one method of creating a breach. There were others. The blood tithe, the severing chain, the concordance of shadows. Different names, different specifics, but the same essential working. The creation of vessels, the extraction of souls, the opening of ways between realities that should remain separate. I learned that the entities could not simply force their way through. They required invitation, required conscious beings to create the conditions necessary for their manifestation, required ritual participants who understood, at least partially, what they were doing, and chose to proceed regardless. This was their limitation and their weakness. They could influence, tempt, manipulate, but not directly act without mortal assistance. I learned too that the Concord was far older than I had imagined. That it predated both Jedi and Sith, had its origins in the first civilization to recognize the danger and choose opposition rather than cooperation. That it had evolved over millennia, adapting to changing conditions, surviving the rise and fall of empires and republics alike. That it included members from across the spectrum of Force philosophy, united by the recognition that some threats transcend ideological differences. Finally, most disturbing of all, I learned that the cycle was accelerating. That attempts to perform the ritual, in one form or another, were occurring with increasing frequency. That the barriers between realities were growing thinner with each attempt. That the entities were gaining greater influence over those they contacted, creating more effective servants, more precise instruments for their purposes. The implications were clear and terrifying. The cycle that had once stretched centuries between iterations was now completing in decades. The breach that had once been the smallest of fractures was now a widening fissure. The time available to prevent full manifestation was running out. When the knowledge transfer was complete, I understood why the Concord had been reluctant to share everything. The burden was immense, the responsibility crushing. To know that the very fabric of reality depended on the actions of a small group working from the shadows. To understand that failure meant not just disaster but fundamental transformation of existence itself. To recognize that there was no final victory possible, only endless vigilance against a patient, implacable force. I almost wished for the ignorance I had surrendered. Almost longed for the time when my concerns had been limited to my own training, my own advancement, my own understanding of the Force. But there is no return from certain knowledge, no comfort in willful blindness once truth has been glimpsed. The leader of the Concord allowed me time to process what I had learned, time to adjust to the weight of the knowledge I had demanded. Then, when I was ready, presented me with a choice. I could join one of the existing cells, work under guidance until I had fully integrated into their methods and protocols. Or I could establish a new operation, using my Sith training and identity as cover to monitor sectors that might otherwise remain unwatched. I chose the latter, not from pride or desire for independence, but from pragmatic assessment of my capabilities. I was trained as a Sith. I knew how to move in those circles, how to recognize the signs of dangerous ambition, how to identify those who might be vulnerable to the entity's influence. I could access archives and locations that would be closed to those without my background and credentials. The Concord provided resources, safe houses on key worlds, communication protocols that would allow me to report findings without compromising security, emergency extraction procedures should my cover be threatened. Most valuable of all, they provided connection, the knowledge that I was not alone in the vigil, that others stood with me against the darkness between worlds. I have been operating as a sentinel for the Concord for 3 standard years now, moving through the galaxy, identifying potential breaches, neutralizing threats before they develop fully. Sometimes this means destroying texts or artifacts. Sometimes it means misdirecting seekers away from dangerous knowledge. And sometimes, when all else fails, it means more direct intervention. I have killed 7 would-be practitioners in that time, 7 individuals who had progressed too far down the path, who had established connection with the entities, who could not be dissuaded or diverted. I take no pleasure in these actions, feel no pride in their necessity, but I act without hesitation or remorse. The stakes are too high for moral equivocation. The most recent case brought me to Mustafar, that hellscape of a world where my master and I had found the volcanic glass mask that led us to Malachor 5. Intelligence suggested another seeker had discovered similar artifacts, was following the same trail we had traversed years before. I arrived to find preparations already well advanced, a makeshift temple established in the shadow of an ancient castle. Captives gathered for the ritual. Preliminary incantations begun. The practitioner was young, perhaps my age when I had accompanied my master to Malachor. A human male with the bearing and training of a former Jedi, though clearly one who had abandoned that path for darker pursuits. He had gathered 9 subjects, each strong in the Force, each systematically prepared according to principles disturbingly similar to those my master had employed. I observed for 2 standard days, gathering information, assessing the stage of preparations, determining the optimal moment for intervention. The practitioner was following a variant of the ritual we had used, modified according to his understanding and resources. The breach had not yet begun to form, but the conditions were being established, the groundwork laid. On the 3rd day, I acted, not with direct confrontation but with subtle sabotage. The compound being administered to the subjects required specific environmental conditions to achieve full potency. I altered the atmospheric processes in the makeshift temple, introducing elements that would neutralize the compound without alerting the practitioner to the interference. It might have been enough. Should have been enough. The ritual would fail without properly prepared vessels, leaving the practitioner confused but not immediately dangerous. Standard procedure called for me to maintain observation, to ensure no further attempts were made, then to guide the individual towards safer avenues of study through planted information and subtle manipulation. But something went wrong. The practitioner sensed the interference, traced it to its source more quickly than I had anticipated. I was discovered before I could withdraw, forced into direct confrontation when stealth had failed. The ensuing battle destroyed much of the temple complex. The practitioner proved more skilled than expected, more committed to his course, more willing to sacrifice everything in pursuit of his goal. In the end, I prevailed, but at greater cost than planned. The captives were freed, their conditioning incomplete, their memories of the experience hazy but not entirely, erased. The ritual materials were destroyed, the texts burned, the artifacts shattered. The breach, barely begun, sealed before it could widen further. Standard containment protocol, executed under non-standard conditions. I reported the incident to the Concord through established channels. Received acknowledgement and instruction to proceed to the next assignment. Business as usual in an operation that has continued for millennia. One more iteration of the cycle, one more temporary victory in an endless war. And yet, something feels different this time, a disturbance in the Force unlike the usual patterns associated with failed breaches, a sense of anticipation rather than frustration from the other side, as if this failure, like all the others, was somehow anticipated, factored into a longer strategy I cannot yet perceive. I find myself thinking of what the entity said on Malachor 5, speaking through my master's possessed form. The cycle is eternal, apprentice. Your victory is momentary. At the time, I dismissed it as the empty rhetoric of a thwarted adversary. Now I wonder if it was something else, a truth I was not yet prepared to understand, a warning disguised as a taunt. What if the cycle itself is the point? What if each iteration, successful or not, serves the entity's ultimate purpose? What if our victories, our containment protocols, our vigilance, are all part of a pattern we cannot perceive from our limited perspective? The thought haunts me as I prepare for my next assignment, as I continue the work that now defines my existence. I am Kira Ren, once apprentice to Darth Farlis, now sentinel of the Watcher Concord. I stand guard against the breach between worlds, against the entities that wait beyond, against the rite of the hollowing in all its forms and variations. I am one link in a chain that stretches back to the dawn of recorded history and must continue until the end of time itself. The burden is immense, the responsibility crushing, the cost higher than I could have imagined when I first set foot on Malachor 5. But I bear it willingly, consciously, with full awareness of what failure would mean. Not just for me, not just for those I might have called allies or enemies in my former life, but for reality itself. Some rituals once witnessed change everyone involved beyond recognition. The rite of the hollowing transformed me from faithful Sith apprentice to guardian against forces my former self would have embraced without hesitation. From seeker of personal power to protector of collective existence, from student to teacher, though the lessons I impart are ones I wish never needed learning. If you are reading this account, take warning from my experience. Some knowledge is poison. Some power corrupts beyond redemption. Some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. The entities wait beyond the veil, patient and hungry and eternal. The breach between worlds thins with each attempt to cross it. The cycle continues, but not infinitely, not without end. Remain vigilant, trust nothing that offers power without price. Question everything that speaks of transcendence or eternal life or mastery over death. These are the lures that have drawn countless seekers to their doom, that have endangered reality itself time and again throughout history. These are the promises that entities make, knowing we are predisposed to believe them despite all evidence, all warning, all wisdom to the contrary. I return now to my vigil, to the endless watch against breaches and rituals and those who would unwittingly serve the hunger beyond the veil. To the knowledge that each victory is temporary, each failure potentially absolute. To the cold comfort that I do not stand alone, that others share the burden, that the concord continues despite everything arrayed against it. The stars still rush past my viewport as I travel between assignments, still endless and indifferent, but I view them differently now, not as backdrop to my personal journey, but as lights that must continue to shine, as reality that must be preserved despite its flaws and limitations, as existence that has value precisely because it is finite, fragile, threatened. I am no longer Sith, though I wear the trappings when necessary, no longer apprentice to anyone but history and necessity. I am sentinel, guardian, watcher against the dark. I am Kira Ren, and this is my testimony, my warning, my truth. Some fates are worse than death, but some purposes are worth living for, despite the cost, despite the burden, despite the knowledge that victory can never be absolute or final. The vigil continues. The watch remains. The breach must stay sealed, no matter the price paid by those who stand guard. That is the truth I have learned, the purpose I have found, the fate I have accepted. May you never have cause to understand it as fully as I do.